The sound of my 8-year-old daughter Brenda's laughter echoed from the backyard as I stood frozen in my father's study doorway, my hands trembling around the birthday gift I'd brought him. Through the crack in the door, I could see my wife Natalie pressed against my own father's chest, her fingers tangled in his silver hair while his hands roamed places they had no right to be. "We need to be more careful, Richard," Natalie whispered, her voice breathless. "David's getting suspicious about the missing funds." My father's laugh was cold and satisfied. "My son is too trusting for his own good. Always has been. 20 years I've been waiting for the right moment to access that trust fund, and marrying you was the perfect key." The words hit me like physical blows. My legs nearly gave out as I gripped the doorframe, the wrapped watch in my other hand suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The inheritance my grandfather had left me, money I'd trusted my father to help manage, was being stolen by the two people I loved most in this world. "David thinks he's so smart with his law degree," Natalie continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "But he's just a naive little boy who believes family actually means something. He'll sign whatever you put in front of him. The fool even put me on his business accounts as backup," my father replied. "Made it so easy to transfer funds to our private account. By the time we're done, there won't be anything left for him to fight over." "And the kids?" Natalie asked. "What about them? Once we have the money we can disappear together. Start fresh somewhere tropical. Let David keep his precious children, they'll just be a burden anyway." That's when something inside me died. The part that believed in family loyalty, in the sanctity of marriage, in the love between father and son. But from those ashes something else was born. Something cold and calculating. Something that would make sure Richard and Natalie learned exactly what happens when you underestimate a man who has nothing left to lose except his children. I backed away silently, my mind already spinning with plans. They thought I was naive. They thought I was weak. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video from. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales like this one. My name is David Castellano, and at 37 I believed I had everything a man could want. A successful law practice specializing in corporate finance, a beautiful wife of 9 years, 2 amazing children, and a close relationship with my father who had been my business mentor and best friend since childhood. That morning started like any other Thursday. I woke up in our sprawling colonial home in Westchester County, the same house where Natalie and I had brought both our children home from the hospital, where we'd celebrated countless birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays, where I thought we'd grow old together. Natalie was already in the kitchen, perfectly dressed in her cream silk blouse and tailored pants, preparing breakfast for Brenda and our 5-year-old son Lucas. Even after 9 years of marriage, she still took my breath away. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, and she moved through our kitchen with the grace that had first caught my attention at a charity gala nearly a decade ago. "Morning, beautiful," I said, kissing her cheek as I reached for my coffee. She'd already prepared it exactly how I liked it, black with just a touch of honey. "Good morning, darling," she replied, her smile warm and genuine. "Your father called earlier. He wants to discuss the quarterly reports from the trust today." I nodded, unsurprised. My father Richard had been helping manage my grandfather's trust fund since I'd inherited it 5 years ago. The old man had built a small fortune in real estate, and the trust generated enough income to secure my children's futures and then some. Richard had always been meticulous about the finances, insisting we meet quarterly to review everything. "Dad's always been so careful with the money," I said, stirring my coffee. "I'm lucky to have him looking out for us." Something flickered across Natalie's face, but it was gone so quickly I thought I'd imagined it. "Yes, you're very fortunate to have such a attentive father." Brenda bounded into the kitchen then, her backpack already slung over her shoulder. At 8, she was all energy and bright smiles, just like her mother had been when we first met. "Daddy, can we go to Grandpa Richard's house this weekend?" she asked, climbing onto my lap. "He promised to show me his new boat model." "Of course, sweetheart," I said, ruffling her curly hair. "Grandpa loves spending time with you and Lucas." The truth was, my father had been spending a lot more time with our family lately. Ever since his divorce from my stepmother Catherine had been finalized last year, he'd become a constant presence in our lives. He'd pick up the kids from school when Natalie was busy with her charity work. He'd join us for dinner at least twice a week. He'd even started involving Natalie in discussions about the trust fund, saying it was important for her to understand our family's finances. At the time I thought it was sweet. My father, lonely after his divorce, finding comfort in his son's family. Natalie being supportive and engaged with our financial planning. Looking back now, I should have seen the warning signs. Should have noticed how my father's eyes lingered on my wife. Should have questioned why Natalie suddenly knew so much about investments and asset management. But I was too busy being grateful. Grateful that my family got along so well. Grateful that my father wanted to be involved in his grandchildren's lives. Grateful that my wife was interested in our financial security. I left for the office that morning with my usual kiss goodbye and love you at the door. Another perfect morning in what I believed was my perfect life. My law practice was thriving. I'd built a reputation as one of the best corporate finance attorneys in the county, specializing in mergers and acquisitions for mid-sized companies. The work was challenging and lucrative, providing more than enough to maintain our lifestyle while the trust fund secured our long-term future. My assistant, Margaret, greeted me with my usual stack of contracts to review and a fresh cup of coffee. She'd been with the firm since I'd opened it 6 years ago, and she knew my routines better than I did. "Your father called," she said, handing me the message slip. "He wanted to confirm your lunch meeting today. Something about urgent trust fund business." "Thanks, Margaret. Clear my afternoon if you can." Dad sounded like he had a lot to discuss. The morning flew by in a blur of contract negotiations and client calls. I was deep in reviewing a complex acquisition deal when Margaret knocked on my door. "David, I hate to interrupt, but I just got off the phone with First National Bank. They're calling about some unusual activity on your business account." My blood went cold. What kind of unusual activity? Large transfers to an account they don't recognize. "The bank's fraud department wants to speak with you immediately." I stared at Margaret, my mind racing. How large are we talking? $50,000 yesterday alone. $300,000 over the past 2 months. The room seemed to tilt around me. $300,000. Nearly half of what my business account typically held at any given time. "Get them on the phone," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Now. The conversation with the bank was enlightening and terrifying. Someone with authorized access to my accounts had been making systematic transfers to a private account I'd never heard of. The signature on the authorization forms was mine, but I had no memory of signing them. "Mr. Castellano," the fraud investigator explained, "these transfers were authorized by someone listed as your financial advisor and business partner. Richard Castellano. Your father, according to our records." My father. The man I trusted with everything. The man who'd insisted on having backup access to my accounts for emergencies. The man who'd been helping me manage the trust fund that was supposed to secure my children's futures. "I need copies of all the authorization forms," I said, my legal training kicking in even as my personal world crumbled. "And I want that account frozen immediately." "We can't freeze an account we don't control, sir. But we can certainly flag any future transfers from your accounts to that destination." After I hung up, I sat in my office staring at the wall, trying to process what I just learned. My father was stealing from me. Systematically, professionally, with forged signatures and careful planning. But why? He had his own money, his own investments. Unless... I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the trust fund management company. "Castellano Trust," the familiar voice of Jessica Woods answered. She'd been managing the administrative side of the trust for 3 years. "Jessica, it's David. I need you to run a complete audit of all trust activities for the past year." There was a pause. "David, your father specifically asked me not to send any reports directly to you anymore. He said he wanted to review everything first to save you the trouble." My stomach dropped. "Since when?" "About 8 months ago. He said you were too busy with the law practice to be bothered with the day-to-day details." 8 months ago. Right around the time my father's divorce was finalized. Right around the time he started spending more time with our family. "Jessica, I'm overriding that instruction. I want every document, every transaction, every transfer for the past year. And I want it today." "Of course, David. I'll have everything ready by 5 o'clock." I spent the rest of the day in a daze, going through the motions of reviewing contracts while my mind raced with implications. When Jessica's report arrived, my worst fears were confirmed. The trust fund, which should have held nearly $2 million, was down to less than $400,000. The rest had been transferred to the same private account that was receiving money from my business accounts. My grandfather's legacy, my children's future, stolen by my own father. But there was something else in the records that made my blood run cold. The account receiving the money wasn't just in my father's name. It was a joint account shared with someone named Natalie Castellano. My wife. I sat in my office until well past midnight, going through bank records, trust documents, and business files. The picture that emerged was one of systematic financial rape, orchestrated by the two people I trusted most in the world. They'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. Every helpful suggestion from my father about account management. Every time Natalie had encouraged me to, let Dad handle the finances so you can focus on your practice. They played me perfectly. The trusting son, the loving husband, too busy building a successful career to notice that my family was being hollowed out from the inside. By the time I finally went home, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. I was going to gather every piece of evidence I could find, build an airtight case, and then destroy them both through the legal system I knew so well. They thought they were stealing from a naive family man. They were actually stealing from a corporate finance attorney who specialized in tracking money and building bulletproof legal cases. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I called in sick to work and spent the day researching private investigators, forensic accountants, and divorce attorneys. If Natalie and my father wanted to play games with family loyalty and trust, I was going to show them what happened when you betrayed someone who understood the law better than they understood deception. The next few weeks passed in a surreal haze of normalcy on the surface and investigation underneath. Every morning I kissed Natalie goodbye and told her I loved her. Every evening I helped Brenda with homework while Lucas played with his toys. Every weekend we had family dinners with my father, who would ruffle my children's hair and ask how their week had been. But underneath I was building a case that would destroy them both. I hired Jake Morrison, one of the best private investigators in the state. Former FBI, specializing in financial crimes and adultery cases. He came highly recommended by a colleague who'd used him in a complex corporate fraud case. David, Jake said during our first meeting at a coffee shop 30 miles from my home, I have to ask you this straight up. Are you prepared for what we might find? Because if your suspicions are correct, this goes beyond simple financial fraud. We're talking about a level of betrayal that most people never recover from. I need to know the truth, I said. And I need evidence that will hold up in court. My children's future depends on it. Jake nodded grimly. Then let's get to work. What he found over the next month was worse than I'd imagined. The financial fraud was just the beginning. Phone records showed hundreds of calls between Natalie and my father, often lasting hours. Text messages that were deleted from Natalie's phone but recovered from cell tower data. Credit card receipts for hotel rooms, expensive dinners, and jewelry that I'd never seen Natalie wear. They'd been meeting regularly for almost a year. Not just planning the financial theft, but conducting a full-blown affair right under my nose. While I was working late to provide for our family, they were in hotel rooms planning how to steal everything I'd built. The surveillance photos Jake brought me were devastating. My father's hands on my wife's body. Natalie looking at him with an expression of desire I hadn't seen directed at me in years. The two of them laughing together like they shared the greatest secret in the world. Because they did. They shared the secret of my destruction. But it was the audio recordings that nearly broke me. Jake had managed to place listening devices in my father's car and Natalie's purse, capturing conversations that revealed the full scope of their betrayal. David so trusting, Natalie's voice crackled through the speakers in Jake's office. He actually thanked me yesterday for taking such an interest in our financial planning. The fool has no idea we've already moved over $500,000 out of his accounts. 20 years I've been waiting for this opportunity, my father replied. I knew when you married him that you were too smart and beautiful for my naive son. You deserve so much more than what he can give you. Once we have all the money transferred, how long do we wait before we leave? Not long. Maybe 6 months. Let me finish liquidating the trust fund, and we'll have enough to disappear to the Cayman Islands. Start fresh where no one knows us. What about the children? My father's laugh was cold. What about them? David can keep his precious kids. They'll just slow us down anyway. Besides, children are expensive and we'll have better things to spend our money on. I had to leave Jake's office after that recording. I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried for the first time since my grandfather's funeral. Not just for the money, though that hurt. Not just for my marriage, though that was devastating. But for my children who were being casually dismissed by people they loved and trusted. That night, I tucked Brenda and Lucas into bed as I had thousands of times before. But this time I made them a silent promise. I would protect them from the people who were supposed to love them most. I would make sure they never had to choose between their mother and their father because their mother had already chosen betrayal over their welfare. And I would make absolutely certain that Natalie and my father paid for every lie, every theft, every moment of their callous disregard for the innocents in their path. The evidence was piling up, but I needed more. I needed to catch them in the act, on record, admitting to specific crimes that would guarantee criminal prosecution. Jake and I planned the perfect setup. My father's birthday was coming up in 2 weeks. Every year we celebrated at his house with a family dinner. This year I was going to give him a gift he'd never forget. Not the expensive watch I'd already bought, but a recording device that would capture his final confession. "Are you sure you can handle this?" Jake asked as we tested the recording equipment. "Sitting through dinner with them, knowing what you know, acting like everything's normal?" "I've been doing it for months," I said. "What's one more night?" But as the birthday dinner approached, I found myself wondering if I could really pull it off. Every time Natalie kissed my cheek, I wanted to recoil. Every time my father asked about my successful law practice, I wanted to scream that I knew he was stealing from it. Every time I watched them interact with my children, I felt sick knowing they were planning to abandon Brenda and Lucas without a second thought. The morning of my father's birthday party, I made final preparations. The recording devices were in place. Jake was positioned outside with surveillance equipment. My divorce attorney, Sandra Mitchell, was standing by with papers ready to file. The forensic accountant had traced every stolen dollar. All I had to do was get through one more family dinner. One more evening of watching the two people I'd loved most in the world pretend to care about me while planning my destruction. As I dressed for the party, I caught sight of myself in the bedroom mirror. I looked the same as always, successful attorney, devoted husband, loving father. But behind my eyes, something had changed. The naive trust was gone, replaced by cold determination. Tonight, Natalie and Richard would finally reveal the full extent of their betrayal. And tomorrow, I would show them what happened when you underestimated a man who had nothing left to lose except his children's welfare. I picked up the wrapped watch and headed downstairs to collect my family for what would be our last dinner together. The drive to my father's house felt like traveling to my own execution. Brenda chattered excitedly in the backseat about the birthday card she'd made for Grandpa Richard, while Lucas clutched the toy airplane he'd picked out with his allowance money. Their innocent love for the man who was planning to abandon them made my chest tight with rage. Natalie sat beside me in the passenger seat, looking elegant in the black dress I'd complimented her on just that morning. She kept checking her phone, and I noticed her lips curve into a small smile at whatever message she'd received. "Dad excited about his surprise?" I asked casually. "Oh, you know Richard," she replied, not looking up from her phone. "He's always so appreciative of thoughtful gestures." The irony was suffocating. If only she knew about the thoughtful gesture I had planned for both of them. My father's house was ablaze with lights when we arrived. The Tudor-style mansion had been in our family for 3 generations, and I'd spent countless childhood weekends exploring its gardens and hidden corners. Now it felt like enemy territory. Richard answered the door with his trademark charm, embracing Brenda and Lucas with the practiced warmth of a loving grandfather. He was still a handsome man at 62, with silver hair and the kind of confident bearing that had made him successful in business and popular with women throughout his life. "David, my boy," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Right on time as always." When he hugged Natalie, I watched carefully for any sign of their intimacy. Nothing obvious, but there was something in the way his hand lingered on her back, the way she leaned into him just a fraction longer than appropriate. The evening proceeded with devastating normalcy. We shared cocktails in the living room while the children played with toys Richard kept specifically for their visits. Natalie helped in the kitchen, moving through my father's house with the familiarity of someone who'd spent considerable time there. During dinner, I listened to them discuss everything from the stock market to local politics, marveling at how easily they maintained their deception. They'd had nearly a year of practice, I supposed. Nearly a year of lying to my face while stealing my children's future. "David, you've been quiet tonight," my father observed as we finished the main course. "Everything all right with the practice?" "Just thinking about family," I said, meeting his eyes. "How important it is to know who you can trust." Something flickered across his face, but he recovered quickly. "Absolutely. Family loyalty is everything. You can't put a price on the bond between blood relatives." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. But I smiled and nodded, playing my part in their elaborate charade. After dinner, the children went to play in Richard's study while the adults moved to the living room for brandy and birthday cake. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The recording device in my jacket pocket was already running, and Jake's surveillance equipment outside would capture everything. "I should check on the kids," I said, standing up. "Make sure they're not getting into trouble." "Take your time," Natalie said, settling closer to my father on the couch. "We'll be right here." I walked toward the study, my heart pounding. Brenda and Lucas were absorbed in building a fort with pillows and blankets, completely oblivious to the adult drama unfolding around them. I positioned myself just outside the study door, where I could hear the living room conversation while keeping an eye on my children. What I heard next shattered the last remnants of my faith in family. "We need to be more careful," Natalie was saying, her voice low and urgent. "David's been asking questions about the bank accounts." "My son is too trusting for his own good," Richard replied. "Always has been. But if he's getting suspicious, we might need to accelerate our timeline." "How much more do we need?" "Another 200,000 from the trust fund, and we'll have enough to disappear comfortably. I can liquidate the rest by the end of the month." "And you're sure he won't figure it out before then?" My father's laugh was cold and confident. David still believes in the fairy tale of family loyalty. He'd never suspect his own father of stealing from him. The boy's too sentimental for his own good. "What about the children?" "What about them? They're his problem, not ours. We'll be sipping cocktails on a beach in the Cayman Islands while he's dealing with their college tuition and teenage drama." Through the study door, I could see Brenda carefully arranging her pillow fort, completely unaware that the grandfather she adored was planning to abandon her without a second thought. Lucas was making airplane noises, flying his toy through the air with the pure joy that only a 5-year-old could muster. "Sometimes I feel bad about leaving them," Natalie continued. "Brenda especially. She's such a smart little girl." "Guilt is a luxury we can't afford," Richard said. "Besides, you never really wanted to be a mother anyway. You told me that yourself. David trapped you with those pregnancies before you were ready." The words hit me like physical blows. Natalie had wanted children. We'd planned both pregnancies together, celebrated every milestone, shared every joy and sleepless night. Or so I'd thought. "You're right," Natalie said after a pause. "I was too young when I married David. Too inexperienced to know what I really wanted. Being with you has shown me what a real partnership looks like." 20 years of watching you grow into the woman you were meant to be," my father said. 20 years of watching my son take you for granted while I saw your true potential. 20 years. They'd been planning this since before Brenda was born. Since the early days of my marriage when I thought my father was just being supportive of his new daughter-in-law. "Do you think he suspects about us?" Natalie asked. "David? He's too busy playing the perfect family man to notice what's happening right under his nose. Last week he actually thanked me for spending so much time with his family. The fool has no idea I've been sleeping with his wife for over a year. I had to grip the doorframe to keep from falling. Over a year. While I'd been working 16-hour days to provide for our family, while I'd been putting Brenda and Lucas to bed with stories about how much mommy and daddy loved each other, Natalie had been in hotel rooms with my father. "The hardest part will be telling him about the divorce," Natalie said. "He's going to be devastated. Let him be devastated. By the time he recovers, we'll be long gone with his money. And honestly, David will probably be better off without us. He can find some boring suburban wife who actually wants to play house and raise children." That was the moment I understood the full scope of their cruelty. This wasn't just about money or sex or even love. This was about destroying everything I'd built, everything I'd believed in with calculated precision. They weren't just stealing my inheritance. They were stealing my children's security, my faith in family, my ability to trust anyone ever again. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. I walked back into the living room with a smile, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Kids are having a great time. Brenda built an impressive fort. She's always been creative," Natalie said, settling back against the couch. Against my father's side. "She gets that from her grandfather," I said, looking directly at Richard. "The ability to construct elaborate plans." Something shifted in his eyes, but he maintained his charming smile. "Well, I've always believed in the importance of good planning. Speaking of planning," I said, reaching into my jacket pocket, "I brought your birthday present." I handed him the wrapped watch, knowing it would be the last gift I'd ever give him. As he opened it, I watched his face light up with genuine pleasure. "David, this is beautiful. You really shouldn't have spent so much." "It's nothing compared to everything you've given me," I said. "All the love, support and guidance over the years. I could never repay you for what you've meant to our family." Natalie shifted uncomfortably, perhaps sensing something in my tone. But Richard just smiled and put the watch on his wrist. "Time is the most precious gift we can give each other," he said. "And I intend to make the most of whatever time I have left." "I'm sure you will," I replied. "I'm sure you both will." We finished the evening with cake and more conversation, and I played the role of loving son and devoted husband perfectly. When it was time to leave, I hugged my father goodbye and kissed my wife's cheek, just as I had hundreds of times before. But as we drove home with the children sleeping in the back seat, I was already mentally preparing for the war that would begin tomorrow morning. I had everything I needed: recordings of their confession, documented evidence of financial fraud, proof of their affair, and a legal strategy that would destroy them both. They thought they'd been playing chess while I played checkers. Tomorrow they'd discover they'd actually been playing with a grandmaster who'd been letting them think they were winning. The last family dinner was over. Now it was time for justice. The next morning, I woke up before dawn with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. While Natalie slept beside me, probably dreaming of beaches in the Cayman Islands, I sat in my home office and began executing the plan I'd been developing for weeks. My first call was to Sandra Mitchell, the divorce attorney I'd retained. Sandra specialized in high-asset divorces involving fraud, and her reputation for aggressive representation was legendary in legal circles. "David, I've reviewed all the evidence you've provided," she said when I reached her private line. "This is one of the most comprehensive cases of spousal financial fraud I've ever seen. With the recordings from last night, we have them dead to rights. What's our strategy? Simultaneous strikes on multiple fronts. We file for divorce today and immediately seek emergency injunctions to freeze all accounts. Criminal referrals for fraud and embezzlement. Asset recovery actions. And given the evidence of your father's involvement in destabilizing your marriage, we can pursue additional damages for conspiracy and alienation of affection." Timeline? Papers can be served by noon. Your wife won't be able to access any accounts by close of business today. Your father will be served simultaneously at his office. My second call was to Detective Ray Holbrook, a white-collar crime specialist with the county prosecutor's office. We'd worked together on several corporate fraud cases, and I knew he'd handle this with the seriousness it deserved. "David, I've got to ask, are you sure you want to pursue criminal charges against your own family?" "Ray, they stole nearly $2 million from trust funds that were supposed to secure my children's futures. My father forged my signature on dozens of documents. They plan to abandon my kids and flee the country. This isn't family dysfunction, it's organized financial crime." "Fair enough. I'll coordinate with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. With this level of interstate planning and the Cayman Islands angle, this is definitely federal." My third call was to the forensic accounting firm that had been tracing the stolen funds. They'd identified every transaction, every forged signature, every fraudulent transfer. The money trail was so clear that even a first-year law student could have prosecuted this case. By 8 a.m., I had an army of legal professionals working on behalf of my children and me. Divorce attorneys, criminal prosecutors, forensic accountants, private investigators, and federal agents. Natalie and Richard had spent a year planning my destruction. I'd spent 2 months planning theirs. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd been using my own legal expertise, advice I'd given them about asset protection and financial planning, to steal from me. Now that same expertise would be used to destroy them. I went through my normal morning routine, making breakfast for Brenda and Lucas, helping them get ready for school, kissing Natalie goodbye as she left for her yoga class. The same yoga class where she'd been meeting my father, according to Jake's surveillance reports. "Have a good day, darling," she said, touching my cheek with a tenderness that felt like acid on my skin. "I love you." "I love you too," I replied, knowing it would be the last time I'd ever say those words to her. After the children left for school and Natalie left for her yoga class, I drove to my office and waited for the calls I knew would come. The first call came at 11:47 a.m. "Mr. Castellano, this is Officer Martinez with the County Sheriff's Department. I'm calling to inform you that your wife has been served with divorce papers. She's requesting to speak with you immediately." "I'm not available to speak with her. Any communication should go through my attorney." The second call came at 12:15 p.m. "David, what the hell is going on?" It was my father, his voice tight with panic. "I just got served with some kind of lawsuit, and the FBI is asking questions about bank accounts. This is insane. Dad, I think you should call a lawyer. And you should probably not discuss this over the phone. David, you're my son. We can work this out as a family. We stopped being family the moment you decided to steal from my children's future." I hung up before he could respond. The third call came from Natalie at 1:30 p.m. "David, please, you have to listen to me. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. We can fix this if we just talk. Natalie, the only conversation we'll be having is through our attorneys. And you should know that the FBI has recovered recordings of you planning to abandon our children. I hope you enjoyed your yoga classes. The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. She finally understood that I'd been watching, listening, and planning while she thought I was oblivious. By the end of the day, the legal machinery was in full motion. All bank accounts were frozen. Richard's business assets were under investigation. Natalie's passport had been flagged to prevent her from leaving the country. The joint account in the Cayman Islands had been located and frozen by federal authorities. Jake Morrison called at 6 p.m. with an update. David, you should know that your wife went directly to your father's house after being served. They spent 3 hours there, probably planning their defense. But here's the interesting part. They tried to access the Cayman account this afternoon and discovered it was frozen. The panic is setting in. What's their next move? My guess? They'll try to turn on each other. When criminals realize they're caught, they usually try to cut deals by blaming their co-conspirators. Your wife's already calling divorce attorneys, and your father's trying to claim he was manipulated by her. That evening, I picked up Brenda and Lucas from their after-school programs and took them out for dinner at their favorite restaurant. They chattered happily about their day, completely unaware that their world was about to change forever. Daddy, is Mommy coming to dinner? Brenda asked as we waited for our food. Not tonight, sweetheart. Mommy's dealing with some grown-up business. What about Grandpa Richard? He usually calls on Thursdays. I looked at my daughter's innocent face and felt my heart break a little more. Grandpa Richard is busy too. But you know what? It's going to be just us tonight and we're going to have the best time ever. Lucas climbed into my lap and wrapped his small arms around my neck. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, buddy. More than anything in the whole world. As we shared dessert and laughed at Lucas's silly jokes, I made another silent promise to my children. They would never have to pay for their mother's choices or their grandfather's greed. Whatever it took, however long it took, I would rebuild our lives on a foundation of honesty and love. That night, after tucking them into bed with extra hugs and bedtime stories, I sat in my study and planned the next phase of the war. Natalie and Richard had started this fight when they decided my family was worth less than their selfish desires. Now they were going to learn that some battles should never be started unless you're absolutely certain you can win. The next morning brought the first wave of consequences. I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages from Natalie, ranging from desperate pleas to angry threats. My father had left 12 voicemails, his tone evolving from confused indignation to barely controlled panic as the reality of his situation became clear. I deleted everything without listening to or reading most of it. They'd had a year to be honest with me. Now they could be honest with their lawyers. My phone rang at 7:30 a.m. Sandra Mitchell's voice was crisp and professional. David, we've got movement on multiple fronts. The emergency asset freeze was approved by Judge Harrison at 6 a.m. Every account associated with your wife, your father, or their joint ventures is now locked down. They can't access so much as a checking account without court approval. What about the criminal investigation? Detective Holbrook is coordinating with the FBI. They're treating this as a RICO case, organized financial crime with intent to flee jurisdiction. Your father's business accounts are being audited, and they've found additional evidence of commingled funds and tax evasion. I felt a grim satisfaction. Richard had always been so proud of his business acumen, his ability to work the system for maximum profit. Now that same system was about to crush him. There's something else, Sandra continued. Natalie's attorney contacted me an hour ago. She wants to negotiate. What kind of negotiation? She's claiming she was coerced by your father. Says he manipulated her into the affair and convinced her that taking the money was just reorganizing family assets. She wants to testify against him in exchange for reduced charges and a favorable divorce settlement. The audacity was breathtaking. After a year of planning my destruction, Natalie was now trying to paint herself as another victim. But her desperation told me everything I needed to know about how thoroughly trapped they both were. What did you tell her attorney? That we'll consider any offer that includes full financial restitution, complete custody of the children, and her cooperation in recovering every stolen penny. Oh, and she gives up any claim to alimony or marital assets. Her response. Her attorney said she needs time to think about it. I almost laughed. Time to think about it? As if she had any leverage left to negotiate. My second call came from Margaret at the office. David, I hate to bother you, but reporters have been calling. Word is getting out about the FBI investigation. How do you want me to handle media inquiries? The media attention was inevitable. A prominent attorney's wife and father caught stealing millions in a conspiracy that included adultery, fraud, and planned abandonment of children? The story had everything local news loved. No comment on anything related to ongoing legal proceedings. If they want a statement, refer them to Sandra Mitchell's office. Also, 3 clients have called to express support. They wanted you to know that your professional reputation isn't affected by this situation. I felt a surge of gratitude. I'd been worried that the scandal would damage my law practice, but my clients seemed to understand that I was the victim, not the perpetrator. At 10 a.m., Jake Morrison called with surveillance updates. David, you need to know what happened after the accounts were frozen yesterday. Your wife went directly to your father's house, and they had what can only be described as a nuclear argument. She was screaming at him about ruining everything, and he was blaming her for being too greedy too fast. Any useful admissions? Better than that. She accused him of lying about how much money was in the Cayman account. Apparently, he told her there was more money there than actually existed. He's been skimming from her cut to fund other investments she didn't know about. Even in their criminal conspiracy, they'd been betraying each other. The honor among thieves was as fictional as everything else about their relationship. There's more, Jake continued. After she left, your father made several calls to offshore banks and investment firms. We recorded everything. He's been hiding money in additional accounts that even Natalie doesn't know about. How much money? Preliminary estimate? Close to $3 million. Your father's been planning this for longer than we thought. Some of these accounts date back 5 years. 5 years. Before Brenda started school. Before Lucas was even born. My father had been systematically stealing from his own family for half a decade, just waiting for the right moment to execute his exit strategy. At noon, I drove to the children's school for an emergency meeting with their teachers and the principal. If this was going to become a media circus, I needed to protect Brenda and Lucas from the worst of it. Principal Rodriguez was sympathetic and professional. Mr. Castellano, we'll make sure the children are shielded from any media attention during school hours. We've dealt with high-profile family situations before. The kids' welfare is our priority. Brenda's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, pulled me aside afterward. David, I hope this isn't inappropriate, but Brenda mentioned yesterday that she was worried about her grandfather. She said he seemed different, lately, more interested in talking to her mother than playing with her and Lucas. Even an 8-year-old had noticed something was wrong. My children had been living in a house full of lies and manipulation, and I'd been too trusting to protect them from it. That afternoon brought the call I'd been dreading. Natalie's attorney had scheduled an emergency custody hearing, claiming I was an unfit parent due to emotional instability and vindictive behavior in pursuing criminal charges against her. Sandra's response was swift and devastating. We're counterfiling for emergency full custody based on evidence that Natalie planned to abandon the children and flee the country. We have recordings of her dismissing them as burdens and expressing no concern for their welfare. What are our chances? With the evidence we have? I'd be shocked if she gets anything more than supervised visitation. Judges don't look kindly on parents who steal their children's inheritance money to fund affairs and escape plans. By 4 p.m., the first news reports were appearing online. Prominent attorney's family caught in million-dollar fraud scheme. The stories were relatively accurate, focusing on the financial crimes rather than the more salacious details of the affair. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother Michael, who lived in California. Saw the news. Flying out tomorrow to help with the kids. You don't have to handle this alone. Other messages of support followed. Colleagues, clients, and friends who'd known our family were expressing shock at Natalie and Richard's betrayal while offering assistance with childcare, legal support, or just emotional support. When I picked up Brenda and Lucas from school, they seemed blissfully unaware of the chaos surrounding their lives. Brenda chattered about a science project, and Lucas proudly showed me a drawing he'd made of our family. Stick figures of him, me, Brenda, and our dog, Max. Notably absent were his mother and grandfather. "Where's Mommy in your picture?" I asked gently. Lucas shrugged with the casual indifference of a 5-year-old. "She's at yoga. She's always at yoga now." That evening, as we ate takeout pizza and watched cartoons, I tried to prepare them for the changes that were coming without frightening them. "Kids, I need to tell you something important. Mommy and Daddy are going to be living in different houses for a while." Brenda looked up from her pizza slice. "Are you getting divorced like Tommy's parents?" "Yes, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that hurt families, and when that happens, sometimes it's better for everyone to live separately." "Is it because of Grandpa Richard?" she asked quietly. I nearly choked on my water. Why would you ask that? Because Mommy talks to Grandpa Richard more than she talks to you. And they whisper a lot when they think we can't hear them. My daughter had been watching, listening, and understanding far more than I'd realized. She'd seen the warning signs that I'd missed or ignored. Brenda, none of this is your fault or Lucas's fault. Sometimes adults make bad choices, but that doesn't change how much Daddy loves you both. Will we still live here? Lucas asked. Yes, buddy. This is your home and you'll stay here with me. Everything else might change, but that won't. That night, after the children were asleep, I sat in my study reviewing the evidence that would destroy two people I'd once loved. Financial records, phone logs, surveillance photos, audio recordings, an overwhelming case that would result in criminal convictions, financial ruin, and social disgrace. I should have felt guilty about the magnitude of the consequences heading their way. Instead, I felt only cold satisfaction. They gambled everything on my naivety and lost. Tomorrow the real reckoning would begin. The custody hearing took place on Friday morning in a packed courtroom. Word had leaked about the case, and the gallery was filled with reporters, legal colleagues, and curious observers drawn by the scandalous details. Natalie sat at the plaintiff's table with her attorney, looking pale and defeated. She'd lost weight in the past week, and her usually perfect appearance showed cracks. Wrinkled clothing, unmade hair, the look of someone whose carefully constructed world had collapsed overnight. Judge Rose Brennan had a reputation for being tough but fair, especially in cases involving children's welfare. She'd reviewed all the evidence in advance, including the audio recordings that revealed Natalie's plan to abandon Brenda and Lucas. Natalie's attorney, David Reyes, made a valiant attempt to portray his client as a victim of manipulation. Your Honor, Mrs. Castellano was coerced by her father-in-law into participating in financial activities she didn't fully understand. She's seeking custody of her children to protect them from their father's vindictive pursuit of criminal charges. Sandra Mitchell's response was surgical. Your Honor, we have clear evidence that Mrs. Castellano actively participated in a conspiracy to steal nearly $2 million from trust funds established for her children's futures. More damning, we have recordings of her dismissing those same children as burdens, and expressing no concern about abandoning them to pursue a new life with her co-conspirator. The judge listened to excerpts from the recordings, her expression growing more stern with each played segment. When Natalie's voice filled the courtroom saying, "The children will just slow us down anyway," I watched several reporters scribbling furiously. Mrs. Castellano, Judge Brennan said directly to Natalie, "You understand that this court's primary concern is the welfare of Brenda and Lucas Castellano?" "Yes, Your Honor," Natalie replied, her voice barely audible. "Then perhaps you can explain to this court how planning to abandon your children and flee the country serves their welfare?" Natalie's attorney objected, but the damage was done. After 2 hours of testimony and evidence review, Judge Brennan rendered her decision. Based on the overwhelming evidence of financial fraud, conspiracy to commit crimes against the children's interests, and recorded statements indicating intent to abandon said children, I hereby grant Mr. David Castellano full emergency custody of Brenda and Lucas Castellano. Mrs. Castellano is granted supervised visitation for 2 hours per week, pending the outcome of criminal proceedings. I felt a surge of relief so powerful it nearly brought me to my knees. My children would be safe, protected from the chaos that Natalie and Richard had created. But the legal victories were just beginning. That afternoon, federal agents executed search warrants on Richard's home and business offices. The news footage showed boxes of financial records being carried out while Richard stood on his lawn in handcuffs, finally looking his age as the weight of his crimes became public. Detective Holbrook called me with updates. "David, we've uncovered a financial fraud scheme that goes back almost a decade. Your father's been systematically stealing from multiple sources, not just your trust fund but business partners, investment clients, even a charity he was managing." "How much money total?" "Preliminary estimate is over $5 million. He used your inheritance as the anchor for a much larger Ponzi scheme. When that money started running out, he accelerated the timeline with your wife. $5 million. My father hadn't just stolen from me, he'd been running a criminal enterprise and my family had been his latest victims." The media coverage intensified over the weekend. $1 million family betrayal, father and son's wife caught in elaborate fraud scheme. The stories painted me as the sympathetic victim of an unthinkable betrayal, which helped protect my professional reputation while ensuring maximum embarrassment for Natalie and Richard. On Monday morning, the dominoes continued falling. Richard's business partners filed lawsuits for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. His country club membership was suspended. The charity board where he served removed him immediately. 3 decades of reputation building evaporated in a matter of days. Natalie's situation was equally devastating. Her wealthy socialite friends began distancing themselves as details of the affair and fraud became public. The charity organizations where she'd volunteered asked her to step down. Even her yoga instructor canceled her membership, not wanting the negative attention. But the most satisfying call came from Sandra Mitchell on Tuesday afternoon. "David, you're not going to believe this. Natalie and your father are now blaming each other for everything. She's claiming he manipulated her into the affair and convinced her the money transfers were legal. He's claiming she seduced him and masterminded the entire scheme. What does that mean for us? It means they're destroying each other's credibility while providing us with additional evidence. Each accusation they make against each other is another nail in both their coffins." The federal prosecutor assigned to the case, Assistant U.S. Attorney Maria Santos, called me directly on Wednesday. "Mr. Castellano, I want you to know that we're pursuing the maximum charges available. Your father is looking at 15 to 20 years for racketeering, fraud and money laundering. Your wife faces 10 to 15 years for conspiracy and fraud. The evidence you provided has made this one of the strongest financial crime cases I've ever prosecuted. What about asset recovery? We've located and frozen over $4 million in various accounts. After legal fees and fines, you should recover the vast majority of what was stolen, plus damages." That evening, I sat down with Brenda and Lucas to explain what would happen next. They'd been remarkably resilient, adapting to their new routine of living with just me while Uncle Michael helped with childcare. "Kids, you know how we talked about Mommy and Daddy living in different houses?" Brenda nodded seriously. "Because Mommy made bad choices." "That's right. Well, Mommy is going to have to go away for a while to think about those choices. And Grandpa Richard too. Are they going to jail?" Lucas asked with the innocent directness of a 5-year-old. "Yes, buddy. They are. Because when grown-ups steal money and hurt families, there are consequences." "Will they come back?" Brenda asked. I looked at my daughter's serious face and decided she deserved honesty. "Someday maybe. But not for a very long time. And when they do come back, they'll be different people than they were before." "Are we going to be okay?" she asked. I pulled both children into my arms. "We're going to be more than okay. We're going to be stronger, happier, and more honest than we've ever been. And we're going to take care of each other no matter what." 6 months later, I stood in the same federal courthouse where my father and Natalie had been sentenced, but this time I was there for a very different reason. The civil asset forfeiture case had concluded, and Judge Martinez was officially returning the recovered funds to their rightful owners, my children and me. The final tally was staggering. $4.2 million recovered from various hidden accounts, plus $1.8 million in damages and penalties. After legal fees, Brenda and Lucas's college funds were not only restored but significantly enhanced. Their financial futures were more secure than they'd ever been. Richard had received 18 years in federal prison. At 62 he would likely die behind bars. The man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd attended every school play and little league game, who'd been my hero and role model, was now a convicted felon who would spend his remaining years in a concrete cell. Natalie had received 12 years. The judge had been particularly harsh in her sentencing, noting that betraying one's own children for financial gain represented a level of moral bankruptcy that demands substantial punishment. She would be eligible for parole in 8 years, when Brenda would be 16 and Lucas would be 13. I felt no joy in their destruction, but I felt profound satisfaction in the justice. They'd gambled everything on my weakness and lost everything to my strength. The children had adapted remarkably well to their new reality. Brenda was thriving in school, her natural intelligence flourishing without the constant undercurrent of adult deception in our home. Lucas had become more affectionate and open, no longer sensing the hidden tensions that had characterized our family life. We'd moved to a smaller house across town, not because we couldn't afford the old one, but because we needed a fresh start in a place without memories of betrayal. The new house had a big backyard where the kids could play, and a study where I worked on rebuilding my law practice. My professional life had not only survived the scandal but flourished. Clients respected how I'd handled an impossible situation with dignity and legal precision. Several high-profile divorce cases had come my way from people who wanted an attorney who understood betrayal firsthand. But the most important changes were personal. I'd learned to trust my instincts again, to value honesty over harmony, to protect what mattered most rather than trying to preserve what looked good from the outside. 6 months after the sentencing, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Natalie, written from federal prison. "David, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness and I'm not asking for it. I know that what Richard and I did was unforgivable. But I want you to know that I think about Brenda and Lucas every day, and I hate myself for the choices I made. You were a good husband and father, and I threw it away for reasons that make no sense to me now. Richard convinced me that we deserved more than the life we had, but he was wrong. The life we had was beautiful, and I destroyed it for nothing. Please tell the children that I love them, even though I know my actions proved otherwise. And please know that you did the right thing in protecting them from me. They're better off with you. I hope someday they'll understand that sometimes people make terrible choices that don't reflect who they really are inside. But I also hope they never forgive me easily because what I did should have consequences that last. You gave me everything and I gave you nothing but pain in return. I'm sorry for that and I'll be sorry for the rest of my life. Natalie. I read the letter twice then filed it away. Someday when Brenda and Lucas were older, they might want to read their mother's words. But for now we were focused on moving forward, not looking back. That evening as I tucked Brenda into bed, she asked a question that had become part of our routine. Daddy, are you happy? Very happy, sweetheart. Are you? Yes. Our family is smaller now, but it's more honest. At 8 years old, my daughter had learned one of life's most important lessons, that a small, honest family is infinitely better than a large, deceptive one. A year after the trial I started dating again. Sarah Morgan was a pediatric nurse who understood the importance of putting children first. She was patient with Brenda and Lucas, never trying to replace their mother but slowly becoming a friend and positive influence in their lives. You know what I love about you? Sarah said one evening as we watched the children play in the backyard. You never talk about revenge or bitterness. You just focus on building something better. Revenge was just the beginning, I replied. The real victory is this, knowing that Brenda and Lucas will grow up understanding that integrity matters more than comfort, that truth matters more than convenience, and that real love protects people instead of using them. 5 years after that devastating birthday dinner at my father's house, I stood in another courtroom, this time as Brenda's father watching her receive an award for academic excellence. She was 13 now, confident and intelligent, with no trace of the confusion and pain that had marked her 8th year. Lucas, now 10, was building a robot with parts I'd bought him for his birthday. He'd inherited his grandfather's mechanical aptitude but none of his moral flexibility. When other children tried to cheat in games, Lucas was always the one who insisted on following the rules. That night, as I sat in my study reviewing case files for the next day, I thought about the question people often asked me, did I regret pursuing such devastating consequences for my father and Natalie? The answer was always no. They'd made a calculated decision to destroy our family for money and selfish gratification. I'd made a calculated decision to protect my children and seek justice through legal channels. The difference was that my calculation included consideration for innocent victims, theirs only included consideration for themselves. What would you have done in David's situation? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting your children? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe that some betrayals deserve consequences, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories where justice prevails over deception. Thanks for watching and remember, the best revenge is building something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal.